Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new. I am glad that you're here today. We are diving straight into our path to independence. So I'm looking at Trinidad and Tobago's independence and how we got here. Now, in this year 2023, Trinidad and Tobago is celebrating 61 years of independence. And that got me to thinking, wait a minute, there must be people who are still alive. In fact, I know there are people who are still alive who are going to remember a time before our independence from British rule. Now, I am not one of those people, but it did get me thinking, how did we get here? What was the path like? What were some of the things that triggered this move to independence from British rule? Now, I know we have learned these things in primary school and secondary school, but as we know, when we were in school, we weren't really paying that much attention because, let's be real, when you're a child, you don't really care that much about history. So in my older years now, I'm thinking, okay, now I'm ready to know this information. I would like to know it a little more in depth than I do. So let me take us back. Picture it, midnight, August 30th, 1962. The British flag is lowered and the Trinidad and Tobago flag is raised for the very first time. All around the country, bells and sirens can be heard going off in celebration of our new independent nation. The celebrations actually went on for more than a week, from August 30th, actually no, August 8th to September 5th. So this went on for more than a month of celebrations. Okay. And if you see me looking down, it's because I am checking my notes in my laptop because it's a lot of information. So there were international dignitaries present, and the Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, was there on behalf of the Queen, and she read the Queen's message of relinquishing her rule of Trinidad and Tobago, and she read it out at the address. I can only imagine the excitement, the energy throughout the country at that time. And if you are watching this video and you were there, you remember, please let us know what it was like. Let us know the feeling, the energy, the celebrations, what you did, where you were. We would love to hear about it. Also, if you want to see the program of the first Independence Day program, you can find that on the NALIS website, and I'll have it linked in the description below. So now that we know how it was on the very first day, let's look at what led up to us becoming independent. So Trinidad and Tobago was formerly under British rule from 1802, and it was quickly developed into a sugar producing colony. Although from 1806 to 1807, slavery was formally abolished, but we know it did not just end overnight. At that time, they wanted to make it a two-step program, step-down program. So slavery was abolished in two stages between 1834 and 1838. And because of this, the sugar cane producers, the plantation owners, were not able to have access to that cheap and steady labor that they were accustomed to off the backs of enslaved people. Then in 1845, the indentured laborers were brought in from India. And this continued until 1917, which is quite recent in terms of history and time. So that's to show you how recent this is in our past. Funnily enough, Tobago had a bicameral legislature until 1874, and Trinidad didn't. in 1889, with the island's economy in shambles as a result of the failure of the sugarcane industry, Tobago was amalgamated with Trinidad while retaining its subordinate legislature and separate taxes. So that's when Tobago joined Trinidad and became Trinidad and Tobago. So in 1899, Tobago became a ward of Trinidad, right? So the Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad was never granted that bicameral legislature with elected officials, and Tobago was, which I still can't get over that, because Tobago was so small, Trinidad was much larger, and because they were joined, you would think they would let that system come over into Trinidad, but it didn't. Instead, Trinidad was governed by the crown, as a crown colony, by a governor from 1831, a legislative council consisting of top officials and so-called unofficial members nominated by the governor. So it's the governor is ruling and he's picking his people, right? The constitution of the crown colony underwent no significant modification until 1925. So again, pretty recent in our history. During the British colonial rule, many activists sought to have elected officials become a part of the Trinidad and Tobago Legislative Council. In 1925, like I mentioned, there was a constitutional reform, and it did in fact allow for 7 elected members. Further, when there was more agitation, civil agitation, with the riots and the unrest led by Uriah Butler, so we have all those the labor movement, those riots, those protests happening in 1937. This led to the grant of universal suffrage in 1945. So that means people could now vote. Our citizens now had the right to vote on their officials, their elected officials, in an election. And further constitutional reform allowed for Trinidad to have self-government. So for about 10 years after that, the political landscape of Trinidad was very haphazard, you could say, because it was mostly individual persons going up for elections and not parties, not political parties coming together with their memorandums, coming together for votes. It was just individual persons going up for election to be the governor, to be a part of the legislature. In fact, I'm not even sure if they were allowed to be the governor. They probably were just elected officials. So that wasn't really getting us anywhere. Then in 1956, the People's National Movement was formed, and locally we know it as the PNM. In 1956, the PNM won victory at the polls and became the first party-formed cabinet government of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, this PNM government was led by Dr. Eric Williams. Through this political landscape and more pressure to be an independent nation, in 1962, like I started off the video with, lots of celebration, we became an independent nation. And of course, we know in 1976, we became a republic of the Commonwealth. This was just a brief history of our path to independence, because as we know, this can form an entire semester of history classes, right? This can be an entire semester of school, and we could be here for months. However, I just really wanted to show that timeline because I, for myself, wasn't clear about the timeline when I thought back on it. Now, I know there would be some people who were very well versed in it, and I'm glad for you. But some of us weren't. A lot of us weren't. When I talked to a lot of people, I was like asking, well, do you know how we led up to independence? And they were like, I'm not really sure now. So I myself was like, you know what, this should be something to put out, because you know, and not a lot of people are going to really sit down and research it. I just thinking back to how excited people would have been at that on that day, the first independence. You could imagine the celebration. Oh, it must have been like Carnival Monday and Tuesday. But anyway, guys, if you made it this far in the video, please drop a Trinidad and Tobago flag in the comments and let me know what is your favorite thing about Trinidad and Tobago. And until next time, guys, that's it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.